Welcome to the Occult Rejects. On this episode, I've got a very special guest and some very special co-hosts. I've got Cody from East10 Productions, and we're talking the Oracle at Delphi. But first, let's go around the room and have everybody else introduce themselves and tell them what they're talking about, and then we'll go to you, Cody. Nick, go ahead. Start us off.
What is up? Yeah, Nick, the Occult Rejects, BitChute, Rumble, YouTube. Obviously, it's on YouTube now, and all major podcasts. Thank you very much for inviting me on. I look forward to this conversation for sure.
Absolutely. ErosUp. Tell them where they can find you.
You can find me at YouTube at ErosUp, and you can find me on Twitter at Eros to Eat Those.
Awesome. And we've got a Alchemy Mondays, which I'm going to be doing from Oklahoma next week. So it's going to be kind of interesting. So we do that show together. And Cody, go ahead and tell them where they can find you and tell them how they can follow you.
Yeah, I'm at East10 Outpost everywhere. I've got a website at east10outpost.com, which isn't live yet, but I mean, I'm literally at East10 Outpost everywhere. So on X, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, all the places. Some of them are more fleshed out than others, but YouTube and X, find me there for sure at East10 Outpost.
Awesome. Now, how would you describe your channel? Because I've been watching your videos and they're just like right to the point. They get right on that topic and then ride it, right?
Well, I'm a storyteller, I think, first and foremost. I try and find topics that excite me personally, because people are going to enjoy that more. You read of it, all that stuff. So I dabble with quite a bit of stuff, from esoteric to the ancient past, occult stuff. I'm kind of all over the place, whatever I'm feeling at the moment. But I recently covered the Oracle of Delphi, the 27 Club, and Robert Johnson and his involvement with all that, selling his soul to the devil. And before that, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So I've kind of been all over the place lately.
Sleepy Hollow.
Awesome. Yeah. I saw that Oracle at Delphi video and I'm like, let's get him on. We're talking about it. Any excuse I have to talk about. Absolutely. Any excuse I have to talk about Hellenism, I'm always there. So what do you think the first thing that really attracted you to covering something like the Oracle at Delphi?
Well, mysticism in general fascinates me. I talk to a number of people that are incredibly psychically intuitive, and I'm definitely a big believer in people's everybody has that ability to some degree. Like I said in the video, we've all been like, oh man, I'm thinking about so and so, and then all of a sudden your phone lights up and they're calling you, or you're walking to your car and you've got a song in your head, and then you get in the car and the exact song you're thinking of is on the radio. We've all experienced those psychic synchronicities, and then some people can actually tap into that, follow those patterns more, and tune that in. So that's kind of been a pattern in my life lately that I've been following personally and watching other people follow. So the Oracle of Delphi video just seemed like it fit perfectly.
Very good. Yeah. I personally think that there's so much we can learn from the mystics of the past and how they influence society. And the Oracle was one of these places that had this huge influence that people really don't see today.
No, it was unprecedented then and now, even. With the exception of, the emperor or the king. I mean, it lasted hundreds of years, and as their political dynamics fluctuated, the one thing that didn't fluctuate was really the second seat of prominence was the Oracle seat. No matter who the ruling party was at the time, they went and consulted the Pythia. So it was a power and an influence and a sway that really, I would say, you only see, and not even to the same degree, but mirrored somewhat in Maria Orsic, and how much she would inform the Third Reich's investigations and dabblings.
Ronald Reagan had an astrologer that was insisted on by his wife as well. So there's sort of a mystical bend to
Lincoln as well.
Governments. He had seances.
Yes.
In the White House.
Mhm.
So there's an undertone of mysticism that I think a lot of people have sort of lost track of. They think everything's just purely physical, but really I think it's a starting point, right? So for instance, Philip of Macedon went to the oracle at Delphi, and he was given his oracle, which he thought meant one thing, but it meant something completely different. Now, what he got was the king is, or the bull is crowned and ready for slaughter. So in his mind, right? Because one of the main things at the oracle at Delphi is know thyself, and you have to know yourself and where you stand in the world for these oracles to make full sense to you. So the oracle he got was the bull is crowned and ready for slaughter. He thought that meant Persia. He thought Persia was the bull. Well, 2 days later, he found out the hard way. He was the bull.
Yeah.
He got murked on stage in front of everybody. And this actually started the rise of Alexander the Great. So from that point, it was a shift from the father over to the son. And they found, I think in 2015, they found his body.
Oh,
They
wow.
knew it was his because he had a spear inside of his leg. And they had talked about that in the histories about how Philip of Macedon got speared in the leg. So it's pretty interesting. They still
That is
haven't found
pretty
Alexander, though.
They
They're
haven't
looking
found
for
a
him.
lot of very important and prominent people, and I don't know how we don't know where they're at.
Right?
Well, I think it's a common thread. The more precious and otherworldly these characters are in history, like especially with the giant bones and things like that, the more irresponsibly they're treated. You know, think about Einstein's brain, for instance, right? They chopped
Oh, yeah.
that up and sent it all over the place. But it seems like the more special the artifact, the worse people treat them.
Well, I think there's also an intentional they use it to kind of muddy the waters, right? Like the conspiracy theorist label is used to just soften the conversation and get people to look the other way. If they can mystify something, right? They can claim that it was just legend, it was just them romanticizing. They can suck the true and incredible power that these people had. And whether it was mystical power or not, it became that regardless, right? I mean, these people inspired nations, great armies, great moments that tilted history permanently. That's mystical, no on any regard, you know. Even if they did it with no magical powers whatsoever, the end result is pure magic, and these people accomplish something that very few characters in history get to accomplish. So if they can mystify those characters and make them out to be just that, just characters and not people, it removes the possibility for the rest of us, right? It eliminates the actuality and makes it just romanticization. And I think that, subconsciously is then humbling all of us as a species. Oh, we can't rise to these heights. We can't perform these amazing feats. These are just fantasies, men of legend. But no, they weren't. And the feats they performed were extraordinary.
Right. And that was one of the special things about the Oracle as well, is everybody was allowed to go there. Everybody was allowed to read their Oracle. And so it wasn't just kings. It wasn't just these emperors. It wasn't just these high figures. Everybody could be there. And it was, access to this sort of mystical understanding for everybody. In fact, out front of the Oracle, they would have these beans that they would paint white and black. And so you would ask a question, reach into the bag and pull out a bean. And based off of whether it was white or black, you'd get a yes or no. So they had sort of a whole mystical practice going on there. And there were actually wars fought over this place as well. Yeah. They had the 5 sacred wars where you had this tribe that was acting as a proxy for Athens near there, seize hold of the Oracle and start funneling all of the money into their own pockets, right? And, shaking down all the pilgrims going to the site. Philip of Macedon specifically said, no, that's not going to happen. So he actually waged war against them, ended democracy in Athens. And then once they actually used Apollo as a symbol for their fight in battle. So he had all of the troops put on the wreath as they went into battle as a symbol for, you're not going to fuck around with Apollo anymore, because he was the god of Delphi.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and you touched on something that was actually, as far as I know, completely unique throughout the old world. The Oracle at Delphi was the only mystic everybody could go to anywhere, as far as I'm aware. South America, North America, all throughout the ancient world. Connection to divinity was regulated to either the shaman class or the ruling class. And it really, as far as I'm aware, was only Delphi where everybody could come and be on equal footing with the Oracle. So that in and of itself is a pretty special characteristic of it.
Did you guys have any questions? Nick?
No, so far, no.
Well, I think what's interesting too is the expression of philosophy there as well. So all of these characters in Greek mythology and their pantheon were transferred over into other symbols, into other aspects of life. They became sort of like a memory palace. So anything that was associated with Apollo got called Apollo, and anything associated with these other gods or goddesses, they got called that too. So you had the snake, which was one of the primary symbols at Delphi. That was the serpent that Apollo slayed, right? And then you also had the Omphalos, the navel of the world. Like, this was where Zeus sent out his 2 eagles to encircle the planet, and then where they crossed over again, that was supposedly the navel. That was the place that was going to rule everything else. So the Omphalos stone was something that I found kind of interesting too. And you were mentioning that in your video.
Yeah, and something I actually didn't know is for a pretty damn long amount of time, like 200 some years, historians actually discredited the accounts of the past and propagated that all of it was completely romanticized. There wasn't fissures in the ground. There wasn't vapors that were emitted from the earth. And it was literally that way until the early 2000s. I had no idea. That's horrible, though. Like, that's hundreds of years of accounts from people just thrown out the window by, semi-modern academia, which is pretty wild to me. But yeah, it's
supposed to be the last person to do that, right?
I mean, it literally, the early 2000s is when it was like finally confirmed that, like, oh yeah, there were these vapors, and they would have produced some hallucinogenic qualities. So it's the whole lore of Delphi is still actively unfolding and being confirmed. And I think that as people kind of awake to that latent mysticism that I think is in most people, we want to be curious, right? We want to be mystified. We want to think that things are magical. That's our human inclination. We were gifted with imagination from source for a reason. So my motto is literally stay curious, because that to me is one of the most important things we can do as a human. Curiosity leads to all manner of things. So it's something that I think, as people kind of awake to that latent desire to find source, to be involved in what's considered like the woo stuff now, more interest will be put on places like Delphi. And I think in the years to come, we're going to see a lot more come out of there and be confirmed, and digs around it that'll find amazing revelations. So I hope a lot of stuff comes out of it in the next few years.
Well, one thing that's interesting is the last oracle at Delphi, the last time they did it back in the 400s AD, they were talking about mid-4th century. According to historical accounts, Julian sent his physicians and at Delphi in an attempt to revive the oracle, right? So this was mid-4th century, around 363. Some sources say that the prophecy was about the drying up of the waters at Delphi, right? But it was heavily influenced at that time by Christian preachers and bishops. So they were kind of trying to get it to shut down, and the best way they thought they could do that is by having an oracle that made them think that it shut down. But what's interesting is that oracle has always been false. They've always had streams running at this place at Delphi, and there's never not been a time when it hasn't been flowing. So in essence, you can kind of see a parallel between what you're talking about. Like, oh, these Greeks are just a bunch of liars. They don't, they're making stuff up in all these histories that they have. But then it turns out, no, they were right, especially about Troy. They said, oh, this Trojan battle, it has to be mythology. There couldn't be a place called Troy. And then they find it back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Is this Julian, the Julian that tried to keep paganism alive? Okay.
That's him. Julian the Apostate.
Yeah, it's so I think it's interesting though, because like the control state, right? It's whatever the control state is of the time, which up until really the 1800s, the control state was the church. So at that point, it then shifted to academia. Academics became the new widespread religion, right? So, and we're on that trend where academia is the authoritative state. Like, think about anything we've seen go on in the country over the last couple of years. Who are they turning to? Oh, well, the professionals, the academics say. So that is the current control state, right? Is academia. So when we talk about, things like demystifying these places, it was the church's job. And then when the church started losing control and influence to higher education, well, then it became, they were the custodian of slapping down anything too mystical or incredible. So I think it really kind of boils down to that, and whoever the most active control state player in the game is.
Well, from an informational standpoint, if you think about everyone having access to a place that can reveal all secrets, that's a completely different form of government than you would have with what we have today, which is nothing but secrets, and they'll lie to your face because they know that you don't have access to, verifiable information. So from that informational level, it was a very different form of government than what we think of today, because according to them, whether you believe in the oracle or not, the oracle could see beyond any veil. So anything you're trying to cover up, probably not going to play out too well if the oracle could see through it.
Well, and I wonder what the internal dynamics of that was like, because if you had the kingship actively believing genuinely in the power of the oracle, that would change the manner in which they present themselves and live and all of that stuff. They would have to, because they would be believing that somebody was going to see through them. Or the flip side of that is it was always a control medium, and they actively used it and put people on the seat who they could use and puppeteer as a tool. And which it is, with the benefit of hindsight, it seems like the oracle did have something going on there. But at the time, I wonder how they viewed that dynamic.
Well, I do see a parallel, because Athens was the one democracy in the entire region. And they're the ones who paid a proxy army to go to war with Delphi to kind of shut it down and control all of the people coming and going from there. And if you look at what America's doing today, we've got proxy armies all over the world trying to shut stuff down. So if it could be more of a democracy thing than a royalty thing, because in essence, all royals back then had to be of these bloodlines of the heroes, right? So in Greece, well, yeah, but they don't talk about that so much. Like,
Try not to.
That's the covert history, right?
Well, it's yeah, and that's a good point, because I do think with that tie to divinity that most of them had back then and readily touted, there would have had to have been a dynamic of them having to present their truest self to the oracle, and that would have been a fascinating thing to be a fly on the wall for.
It's in a lot of ways kind of an initiation. You're showing your preparedness to lead by going before the oracle and basically being the emperor in his new clothes.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Some of the things that I didn't know were like how the Pythias would actually interact with the vapors and stuff. Because that's always like I've always known the lore to it. But when I actually researched it, that was a really unappealing job. So from the standpoint of the Pythia, you would have to be incredibly dedicated to it. Like it wasn't like a nunhood type role. Because I mean, as strict as they lived their lives, the Pythia had it way worse. So there would have had to have been, I think, you can't rationalize any other way, a very, very serious internal pull and desire and trueness from at least the Pythia's standpoint to be able to rationalize all of the horrible shit that they dealt with as a result of being the Pythia.
Right. And they did change some of the requirements between ages, right? And you had early on, they had to be these young women, right? Very, very young. And then later on, they just said just has to be a virgin, can't have a child.
30. Well, specifically, it had to be 30 or later after, I think, the sixth century, maybe. It was pretty early on, but specifically, it did become 30 after a series of pregnant Pythias and kidnapped Pythias and assaulted Pythias. They were like, this isn't working out good. So it was then a virgin, which just meant no birth, and over 30. But like the tests they would do for that were also like terribly humiliating. So you would have had to been like very serious about your desire to be the psychic oracle to get this job, because absolutely nothing was in it for them, as best as I can tell.
And wasn't it other oracles that picked these the new ones out?
Yes and no. So the priesthood had like the first pick, and they would do like the narrowing down, and then there were a number of like physical tests that they would have to endure. And so like those would weed out some of them. So like for the very small batch you had left, the current Pythia did during certain times have more sway on who the next Pythia was, but not always. More than anything, the priesthood had first pick of it, and then who could naturally withstand it was kind of the second eliminator. And then the Pythia would get to decide from there sometimes. So
that's why they did like a physical fitness test. So you get like,
oh man. So
you know, like, more mental strength though.
Do you want me to say specifically what they have them do?
Yeah, let's hear it, please.
Yeah. So the priesthood, like multiple of them would have the Pythia get up on an elevated platform and squat naked over them. And they would like inspect them thoroughly for any scarring, stretch marks, anything that they considered to be signs of a birth. And like most women didn't pass it at all, whether or not they had actually given birth. Anybody who's actually known a real woman knows stretch marks are totally normal and a part of the body. So it's like that alone.
Oh, you get that from fluctuating in weight.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's
a
normal part.
And they have stretch marks. You know what I'm saying? They didn't pop out a kid.
It's a totally normal part of the physical body that can happen with or without kids. But like that was one of the main things they were looking for. So like it was a lot of very non-scientific, and in my mind, like probably sexually motivated tests that they would put these women through. Because you had all of these priests, right? And compare them to like modern priests. The more sexual restraints these people live under, it seems like the more deviance they seem to have when they have the ability to do so.
Well, they had similar body standards for Olympic athletes as well. So they had very strict standards when it came to these bodies that they would show as these examples of what the society was the ideal of. And in a lot of ways, that's what motivated their artwork too. This is what motivated them towards that perfectionism, is the idea that these things can be perfected. And that was their view of the gods, is the gods are the most perfect and the most beautiful things in the world, and the people closest to them should be as well.
Yes. And that's exactly it. And the art really kind of personifies that perfectly. But when it came to the Pythia, they wanted her to be as natural as possible. And throughout history, you always had the trope of the virgin being the most, psychically in tuned or connected to source. It changes slightly in variation, but all of them seem to have the like virgin maiden draw. The whole, unicorn lore, all of it. So it's to them, they felt like the more natural the woman was, which I don't know why birth would make that any less natural, possibly, but the more pure, whatever, the more in tune she would be. So they wouldn't allow them to shave their armpits, any body hair whatsoever. Hair had to be, continuously long and never cut. They wouldn't allow them to comb their hair even. So like most of the Pythias just had like massively knotted messes of nest that would go everywhere, and sometimes in the vapor cause them to trip and like fall into the fissure. Happened a bunch of times, crack their head open on the ground. So like the whole thing, just from every angle, was not a very good process for the woman going through it. A lot of very humiliating.
There's so many parallels between that and like what I see happening today. Like hair is often associated with like divine attributions. Like you can tell certain things about a person, where they come from, through looking at their hair, as well as like witches are always known for having really long hair. There's something about this.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something about this hair that actually has some sort of psychical quality to it.
And that's something I've probed.
Yeah.
I've actually talked to a number of people that, from observing them, I've seen they are very in tuned, and it's an antenna, essentially, is their consensus. And the more they dye it or cut it, the more the signal is diluted. And for men, and you'll see it throughout history, that's often in our beards, right? The more initiated one was into the mysteries, generally the longer and unkempt the beard would be. So it's that trope is mirrored in men and women, and it boils down to it's the antenna.
Right. Hair, bones, and fascia are all piezoelectric compounds. So there's something happening with the electricity, which also goes back to the Pythia, because the fault lines that were there, that these fumes were coming up from, also have a massive amount of electromagnetic energy coming through the fault lines as well. So, in a lot of ways, there could be multiple influences on the mind in changing consciousness at these sites.
Isn't the fault lines disputed as well, though?
It was. It was up until the early 2000s. I think 2005 specifically is when it was kind of definitively proven once and for all, because it started back in the 80s. A geologist was doing ground surveys of fault lines for nothing at all to do with any historical things, a modern government scan. And years later, after he had done these surveys, he happened to be in an academic setting around a bunch of historical academics. And somebody had said that there was no fault lines under Delphi. And he's like, I know that's not true at all. I had to do surveys years ago. And so the two guys actually made a bet amongst each other. And they went out, they resurveyed everything. And by the early 2000s, and I want to say it was 2005 specifically, it was definitively proven that there are active fault lines intersecting literally directly under the seat of Pythia. Like none of that was a myth whatsoever.
I swear, surveyors are like the biggest enemy of like propagandists.
They are. It's just hard data, and it's hard to argue with hard data, you know. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it was a geologist that restored the honor of Delphi and the knowledge that there was a Pythia there, sitting on a stool in front of fissures with vapors coming out of them, exactly as said. It's not mythos. It's not grandiose romanticizing of, you know, ancient past historians. That's the shit that was actually happening. So I think that's important for us to like be fully cognizant of, because for hundreds of years there was an actual person sitting on a concrete stool huffing vapors and giving prophecies.
Well,
and that's pretty wild.
Even that is in dispute, because they've got some that list this 3-pronged stool, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. And then others said that no, they were right on top of the omphalos, which is what the vapors came through. So I think it's probably a hybrid of both.
Well,
But,
so
you know,
I think it actually changed because of accidents. In my research, it seemed like how they described the Pythia being seated changed in the later times, which was after an accumulation of women falling into the fissures when they were in trance state. So yeah, that was actually like a pretty big problem. That happened to a lot of Pythias. So
well, they had multiple gods that ruled over the different sites. I wonder if Apollo was just less into safety.
Yeah, he wasn't the OSHA supervisor for certain. It's what I was going to say that you had mentioned a second ago in altered states. So they proved definitively that these vapors were hydrocarbon gases. There's a couple different ones that they've identified, but one of them is one that we use in modern day during like dental procedures and stuff. So if you took somebody who is already psychically inclined and you put them under this altered state, and it's not psychedelic, like where they're going to be in a completely different, you know, realm. It's simply just an altered state. I think that some truly incredible stuff could be happening if you had a woman that actually in tuned and then also able to drop the conscious veil. So I really don't think it was any kind of smoke and mirrors or theatrics or stagecraft. But I think you had women who were very, very dedicated to what they knew in themselves. They knew thyself. And that's the reason they were willing to endure so much physical, emotional, mental anguish to perform the duty. They felt called to do so at a, you know, fundamental core level. Otherwise, who would go through all that stuff?
Right. It I think a lot of times the current people look back at these other religions and they think there's no way they could have been pious to that. They must have just been atheists or whatever. But that completely denies anything that was happening in the culture at the time or how they viewed the rest of the world and their cosmology. It's almost kind of ridiculous, because you could see it from these different pathways if you just give it a chance and open your mind to different cultural perspectives. But I think one of the things that stood out to me was during the early days, the Pythia were called the Melissae. Well, they were still called that afterwards. It was more like the whole congregation of priestesses were called the Melissae, which would be like these honey witches. And they hung out in this cave, and this cave was the site that, you know, all of the travelers would be like, well, I'm going to go by there because they've got something going on. And so the Melissae were like these honey priestesses, and they had these gold charms of women, sort of like in the style of the harpies, right? Women on these on the top of bees, right? Normally a harpy would be a woman's head on the top of a bird, right? But in this case, it was a woman's head on top of a bee, and that was the symbol for these Melissae. So I mean, that sort of endured. And I think there's something to the idea of the hive mind happening at Delphi, since this is the navel of the world. This is the central point for everybody. And now this is your hive mind moving forward. It's kind of a, an underlying, I guess, indication, not necessarily overt, more of an esoteric one.
Well, for people who are open to the idea of it, you'll see intuitive people naturally resonate with each other. And then the things, if you just observe, that will come from them when they do, it's really phenomenal. And the ability, when they're working together in that coordinated way, to tap into the collective consciousness, it really becomes a hive mind at that point. Because a lot of communication is then being intuitively felt instead of verbally dictated. And to have people kind of in sync in that way is a very potent and tangible thing that you can go on any social media, and as long as you can find those woo circles, you can just watch it unfold, and you can see proof of it all the time. When enough intuitive people get together, that hive mind really does form, because then they're able to kind of bounce off of each other and tune the intuition. So it creates a very interesting hive mind effect, and I think the symbology is very intentional there.
Tap it in. Yeah. So I've got a list of the different deities that were in charge, or the oracle that was speaking through the Pythia. The first one was Gaia, right? So this is the goddess of the earth. That's,
Right.
Basically the origin for all of the rest of their mythology. The second was Phoebe, and Phoebe was daughter of Gaia, also the light. That's Phoebus. Anything with the PHO in Greek has to do with light and phosphorus and all the rest of that. Themis, this is the one you see out in front of the courthouse, the one with the blindfold on, the one with the sword, the one with the scales. She was the third oracle at Delphi. She was also the one that was in charge of the bringing humans back after the flood. So they had a flood myth too. And then you have Apollo, Dionysus, Athena, and Poseidon. Maybe not in strict order, but those are the different gods that were speaking through the Pythia to the people at Delphi.
Yeah, and so what's interesting is they would the gods would take breaks sometimes, even, which I found pretty interesting. Like Apollo had like certain periods of the year where he just wouldn't commune, so you'd have like guest host gods dropping in on the on the temple. And what's interesting is, like, during the time of Apollo, of it being a temple of Apollo, when Apollo was not in session and you had a fill-in god like Athena, the rate of travelers and pilgrims was substantially lower. So that was like an off season for the Pythias, who did actually get an off season, by the way. They were allowed, I think, 1/4 of the year to be with family,
to lick their wounds.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, take a bath, like anything. Like, God, when I was researching like that part in particular, I was like, literally, who the fuck would do this? Like, what is in it for any of these gals? Like, and that's what I keep being drawn back to, as far as like internal proof of its legitimacy, right? Who would be willing to go through those kind of trials if it wasn't of the highest internal belief, right?
I mean,
it doesn't.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, they're partying with kings and gods, basically.
But
so
were they?
I wouldn't do that.
The Pythia didn't get to have that type of interplay. The priests did, but the Pythias didn't.
But
so
you're high and you're consulting kings and gods.
And I think the idea of it was probably romantic, but they wouldn't have ever remembered any of their times being high talking to the kings. It's not like they were smoking a joint with them and being like, you know what I think? They were on like methane gas. like if you were in your garage with the car running and just breathing that shit, and somebody walked in as you're half unconscious in the driver's seat and was like, hey, you all right in there? You're not going to remember being like, no, I'm almost passed out for breathing all this shit. So I don't actually know that outside of the idea of like, I do this for a living, they weren't getting to enjoy the in moment of it. Like if you've ever sat down with somebody cool and smoked a cigarette with them or had a beer with them, like you remember that. You hold on to that shit forever. These Pythias didn't remember anybody they fucking talked to or what they did all day. Like it took them hours to come down and like have enough oxygen back in their brains to know what the fuck was going on. So I don't know that actually was an incentive for them.
Well, they also had to, like, the only way that they knew it was a legitimate oracle is it had to be in hexamic pentameter. So they're not only, really high, but it's got to come through as poetry as well. So there's a indicator there that, man, they had to be really on a different level,
Yeah, I was going to ask, did they ever, was there ever any accounts of them that speaking that way? And then they would say that's no good, or was it always just
a lot?
Oh, there was. Okay.
A lot.
I don't know if there was like a ratio.
No, so like they wouldn't actually get the chance to do that until a turning of the guard was about to happen. And usually that's because the Pythia was falling in ill health. You didn't retire from that job, you died from it. I believe very few, like less than 10 in all of known Pythia history actually like stepped down from the job at a certain point. And it wasn't like voluntary, it was still for reasons, but the rest of them died. They died in the seat, usually around 50 years old. So when indications of the Pythia losing her cohesion started to become prevalent, then the other ones would start to get to try it out, like in the off season they would get to. But for years they were getting used to the vapors. So a lot of women could stand the vapors, but then when the time came for them to actually sit on the seat and have the moment, they were not speaking poetry. They were just glazed. So you would have a lot of late game ejections for that reason. Or also what would happen is when Pythia would be like suddenly put in the seat, you would have a big turnover of very manic Pythias because their bodies hadn't had time to acclimate to all of the gases they were huffing. So from a health level, the way it interacted with them was actually pretty serious. And very, very, very few of them could withstand it and give coherent poetic prophecy. Very few. So it like when they got one, it was pretty obvious this is the one.
Wow.
A lot of women died figuring that out each time though. Like wild shit. It's that's like if you compare it to like any predominantly female religious sect anywhere else you look in the world, or like modern nuns, like I've already said, anything, you don't really see that sort of toll taken from the medium. And I think it's interesting that for so long it could endure that way, knowing what you were signing up for ahead of time. So the navel of the world definitely sums it up well. They knew it really was the center of prominence, and they treated it as such. And to your point earlier about like maybe they were just enjoying the fact that they were getting high and talking to kings, I'm sure there was a level of pride that came with it.
Right? Like well, part of the Delphic maxims is show respect to the oracle. Like that's very prominently displayed. So there was 147 of these Delphic maxims, which were posted around the ancient world in all these different temples. And the only reason we know that they existed in their full length, according to the second century authors that wrote about them, is because there was a fragment of one found in Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
In Afghanistan, that's part of where, Alexander the Great conquered. And so they had temples to the oracles up there, and they had the full text of the Delphic maxims up there as well. So
That's incredible.
There's something to be said about how influential all of these, like you could see the parallels between the Delphic maxims and the Ten Commandments, like very specifically. And so, which came first? I think might have been the Delphic maxims, but go figure. And they had such an influence because it was like this is the bedrock baseline of moral authority coming directly from the gods themselves. And there were other oracles, but they talked to different gods. Like there was one in Syria at Baalbek, which was a Roman oracle. And this influenced the Sibylline books, right? So there was a lot of other oracles going on, but this was the one that was open to all Greeks from anywhere in that region.
Well, and what's interesting is because there were oracles all over the place for all the different gods of any one religion, and then other religions and all their different gods. So I like the whole Mesopotamian region, had mystery cults and oracles all over the damn place for all of their gods and goddesses. So like you had that happening in the modern Middle East, you had that happening over, further into, Europe and stuff. So it's, the spread was far and wide, but the center of the earth was Delphi. Like the fact that it obtained the position really, I think, speaks to its potency.
Absolutely. And as a political symbol, it, survives even to this day. I mean, you've got companies named after it, the Oracle and all the rest of this computer technology always harkens back to the Oracle at Delphi. It still occupies sort of a seat of power within the mind today.
Well, in the same way that Gilgamesh obtained immortality, right? Like a lot of these people have lived on through the legend they created. That was the immortality that they obtained. And I do think there's something to be said about that. And the symbols they continue to inspire. Those things haven't ever left us. I think they've just gone dormant in the public psyche a little bit.
Until you got to rebrand your company, then you go straight to Greece and you use one of those names.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
need a government building? Greek architecture. New courthouse? Stop that Greek architecture some more. Like, yeah, it is the most, I think, plagiarized and abundant well. But I think that's because they were great plagiarists themselves. So, like, it's just a continued recycling of greatness and honing in on what truly connects us as humans to source. That's things like fine art, exploration of the mysteries, the things that naturally inspire us as humans, connect us back to source, right? So I do think that there is a good and practical reason, but I think there's also more esoteric reasons why they do it as well.
Absolutely.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So calling it the center of the earth, or, I guess in, like, some people would say where the North Star, shines down on the earth would be that point. Is there anything significant other than the fault lines? Like, is there anything in the stars or anything super significant other than the fault lines that could indicate that this spot is special? I know that there's like limestone, like stuff like that, but like anything else.
So, according to Plutarch, I believe before there was ever a Temple of Apollo, uh, the locals regarded that exact area as incredibly important because goats would apparently go up to it, breathe the vapors, and the goats would start reciting prophecy. So you had talking goats apparently before there was a temple, and then of course there was the mythos, like was said earlier, of the eagles flying around the earth and crossing path at that exact point. So it was reason that must be the center of the earth if they were let go at the same time, and that's where they recrossed. So you've got the mythology, and then you've got local lore. But as far as I'm aware, there wasn't anything astrological about it. I don't think they knew of any specific electromagnetic properties going on there. I think it was just a combination of local lore and then biblical lore for them. But
in the retreat of Apollo, they would always know that he had retreated back to Hyperborea with the appearance of Lyra and Cygnus in the night sky. So the Lyra, obviously the harp, that's the symbol of Apollo, and Cygnus being the swan, being the symbol of Zeus. So I think they were very heavily connected with what was going on astrologically, with what gods were coming and going from the site.
Yeah, and so I believe that influenced their cycle of when Apollo was in session or when Athena was in session. But as far as I've seen, I don't think it originally influenced the actual location. Do you know of anything? Have you heard to that effect?
There might be some sort of asterisms, but it wasn't like the Egyptian, pyramids where they were all lined up with the sky as well. I don't think there was something like that, but Mount Parnassus is very important for when it comes to Greek mythology and all the things that happen there and all the things associated with it. Oftentimes, these places are really close to mountains. Mount Olympus and all Mount Ida, for example. So,
they were the Titans,
oracle, right? Having the oracle at the cave is the unification of the sky and the earth. These are the places where all these forces sort of meet.
Yeah, and that symbiotic relationship is what I think they were, symbolically trying to portray. And so they did view the mountains as Titans. I actually can't remember.
They had some where, for example, the what's his name? The big bad guy. Typhon? He was smashed by a boulder, and that became a volcano in, I think it's Santorini. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But that's where Typhon is at, as well as Hephaestus. So Hephaestus's workshop is under that mountain as well. So there's lots of different mountain indicators when it comes to that sort of factor. But all of the locations that they talk about in Greek mythology are holy sites to their religion.
Oh yeah. And there doesn't seem to be as much energetic focus, I guess, on a lot of the Greek sites as there seemed to be in other cultures around the world. And I find that kind of interesting. I wonder, because at that point by Greek culture, you had a more refined understanding of the mysteries, right? You'd already had thousands of years of really great civilizations already exploring them from every angle, that they went and conquered the lands and were like, hey, what you got going on over here? And they kind of pulled from the best of everything. And it's always been kind of fascinating to me that the way in which they chose their sites doesn't actually seem to be on par with the way a lot of other ancient civilizations did. Have you ever noticed that?
Well, I mean, there are some indicators that they were more interested in how they could see the sky as opposed to what was on the ground beneath them. So a
Right.
lot of times the Artemis temples would be high up in the mountains where nobody could reach them. And, to this day, there are Artemis temples up there on these mountainsides that, they're not sure how they got there, why they would be there, but I guess that's some sort of a pilgrimage site. So they have indicators that that was the case. So, it was part of the worship that these things were difficult to get to. Like there had to be an effort. I mean, you see that in the stories of Hercules as well. There has to be some sort of physical effort, overwhelming physical exertion that goes on that brings you to that state of gnosis. That's the sort of the beginning of gnosis.
The 40 days in the desert, right?
Exhaustion, right?
The trial by fire. Yeah, it's a repeated trope, but I do think there really is something to it. I mean, anybody who's ever been through that kind of ordeal knows, yeah, I mean, it really does bring you closer to yourself and to this planet and to source. It's a fascinating experience to go through trials of that kind. So I think the old world insisting on it was an interesting, manipulation in a way to get people to that elevated state, but maybe a necessary one. I don't know. Maybe you can look at how things are going now spiritually for our species, and say maybe we should still be hooky dooking people into walking up 100 flights of stairs to go to church. Probably be good for our overall fitness level too.
Absolutely. Look at the energy level of the Greeks, man. I mean, they built all that stuff in like 400 years. So
they had so much energy, they had to create games to do something with excess energy.
And they had more feast days than actual work days. So they're building all that stuff.
What are we doing with our lives, guys?
What exactly? Like they had a very different religion with a lot more energy. And I think that comes through the fact that Greece itself is sort of like a rocky outcrop over an unforgiving ocean. Like it is a very harsh terrain. And they had to figure out a way to survive in that climate. And I think one of the ways was to just sort of like impose physical stress, strenuous activities, so that you would be prepared for anything that comes your way.
Yeah, there probably was intentional to some degree, but I think just in the modern time we've gotten so detached from what actually healthy is, right? Like abundance is the norm. We live in abundance every day, even when we think we're not. But the reality is you rewind back to a time that didn't have grocery stores. Like abundance was never the norm. So we used to keep ourselves inactive fast because that's just how it was when you were surviving. And the health benefits from that, the psychological benefits from that, I think it's probably the natural state to be in. And now it's hard not to, have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks in between. But like they were much more connected to the earth back then. And I think that probably made the psychic connection of seeking divine guidance probably a lot stronger. When life was a trial by fire every day, you're connected to source a lot closer.
And everything was cyclical, right? Because you would go by seasons.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Heavily agrarian. Like that's one of the things that people really forget about how urbanized and awesome Greece was. It was an agrarian society through and through.
Well, everything was agrarian pretty much until 200 years ago. But
right.
Yeah. It's
easy to forget that when you see the Parthenon.
Yeah.
Well,
it is I think a lot of times when people look back at the past, they're projecting our modern framework onto it. And so like maybe we can give the academics a little leniency here on why, you know, they'll insist these things are mythos, because it's hard for a rational mind to detach from what we can tangibly see and feel and test. When you're diving into the ancient past, it's not tangible, right? You have to be imaginative at that point. You can read things they wrote, but you still have to imagine the actualization of that. So when you have people who are strictly analytical, trying to wrap their head around something that can't be quantified that neatly, you know, maybe that's where some of the dismissiveness comes. But I think when you really are able to divorce yourself from the modern way we look at things and understand things and kind of adopt the ancient framework, it really shows how magical the old world was. And whether it was Greece or Rome or Egypt or any of the Mesopotamian countries, or city states rather, that general living in the mystical, that was the reality of their framework. If it didn't rain, it's because you pissed God off, and that was settled science. Like that's honestly pretty fucking cool to like have that level of like, well, guys, we done it. We're not gonna have a good crop this year if we don't straighten our shit up. That level of like overall connection to planet and to source, I'm sure did create an overall higher consciousness, because they felt like they literally had to, or the gods would just like not grow them corn that year. So that probably was an interesting dynamic of the past that now we have a hard time fully understanding.
Well, what I love to say is that land is the lens by which we view God. And that's so much more apparent in the ancient world, because where they come from is how they viewed their deities. And, you know, the desert gods would have a completely different belief system as opposed to the, you know, more urbanized or agrarian civilizations. Yeah. You know, like if you look at the version of, what's her name? The Persephone in the Mesopotamian world, it was Nergal. So Persephone would come up during the spring and then, you know, go out and raise all these crops. Whereas in the Mesopotamian region, it was Nergal who was the god of war. And so they would go out there and steal everything from their neighbors, because that was the springtime, and that's what you did in the springtime.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, depending how harsh the region was like how unforgiving their god was also. Which I think is pretty funny. They're like, oh, our god's a dick out here. You guys got it good. It's a fascinating thought construct to like genuinely try and immerse yourself in that way of thinking. And I think now we're seeing a lot more inclination and desire as people are looking around and kind of really more than ever getting a grasp of like how far down the wrong direction we've gone in like every fucking way, just as a species. Like it's not even like a per country thing at this point. We're not doing it right as a species on a you know, macro level. So I think as more people on a micro level are becoming aware of that and being like, ooh, you know, how do we right this ship? You are seeing that pull towards mysticism happening again, and the desire to adopt that ancient way of viewing our planet as genuinely awe-inspiring and fucking incredible and capable of nurturing us or destroying us like that. So there's an interesting part to play in science, in spirituality, you know, in exploration of history. but ultimately it's going to take a combination of all of those things for us to genuinely upgrade as a species. And I think throughout history, you've seen different aspects of it be embraced. But in our modern day, I think a lot of people, and more by the day, are kind of coalescing into this understanding of modern principles and an understanding of ancient facts and the ability to interplay those. And I mean, it looks like hermeticism a lot in most cases, but I think people are genuinely gravitating back towards that right now.
It is amazing.
Hermeticism. Oh, go ahead, Eros.
It is amazing to think about how in touch they must have been with the archetypes. And it's almost like a universal somatic intelligence,
Mm-hmm. Well,
that we don't have today.
We shame for archetypes now, right? Like,
oh my gosh, yes.
If you're too masculine, if you're too feminine, you're shamed for it.
Or
if
believing
you're too
in
heroic.
them.
Yeah. Oh, heaven forbid. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and again, that's probably that intentional delegitimizing of mysticism as a whole, because the ability to understand, believe in, and not just that, but even personify an archetype to those levels is something they don't want.
I think that it comes from not knowing yourself, because if you don't know yourself and people are putting an archetype in your face and they're like, you have characteristics of this archetype or something, I think it can really freak people out, because they don't know themselves enough to be like, yeah, that is me or that's not me. And so it's like really uncomfortable to start to have those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, I agree. From the time we're born, we're painted with a preconceived brush, right? If you're born in a certain time, in a certain place, you're a certain gender, whatever the case may be, you're already getting painted with a brush of what the larger society and what the local society expect you to be before we're even conscious. So we grow up naturally in the programming of what modern archetypes they want us to achieve, and it's very detached from our natural ones, which the old world understood beautifully.
Yeah, very true. But it's
Absolutely.
definitely true that people demonize it too, and that doesn't help at all. Being like, oh my gosh, Gemini, toxic, or you know how
Scorpio,
it is.
right? They always get the bad rap. It's a Scorpio.
Right.
I'm married to one. I tell people that, and they're like, "Oh, good luck," and I'm like, "It's actually just pretty normal."
But it's like all of us are much more complex than any single god. These are simpler forms. These are like closer to ideal forms, and I think that it's just quite complex how the energies can work together, and you can't generalize anything, even archetypally.
I agree.
Right, they're Legos.
Mm-hmm.
Legos in a system.
Yeah, and I mean that's part of like the modern system infrastructure we've created, right? Where the value a human has only depends on what they can give to the larger society. There's no internal gratification or rewarding of internal gratification. It's what you can do for the larger society and how useful you are to the governance of that society. So I think back then when you had completely different systems based off completely different needs of life, it allowed for the freedom of mysticism, where now we've kind of eliminated the space societally for that to even exist naturally. So when people do feel that draw, it does feel unnatural or taboo, just because of the box we've put ourselves in.
Right. Yeah. Most things aren't going to produce value.
That's
I mean,
right.
like monetary value.
Yeah.
And so they are kind of discarded or shamed.
Well, art in general, right? I mean, any arts is
Art,
almost
emotion.
yeah. And that is and has always been known to be the expression of the gods. So the purest form of divinity is beauty through art. And whether that's music, painting, sculpture, regardless of the artistic medium, that is the physical personification of divinity that we as humans get to experience whenever we want. And if that can be muddled or minimized, then our connection to that true divinity is minimized and muddled.
Absolutely. Beauty is salvation. At least it was in the ancient world.
Mhm.
Today, we try to get away from those Greek style buildings because they're very expensive and we've got a very inflated currency.
Yeah, well, God, you look at the new library in Obama's name or whatever. That's the ugliest fucking building I have ever seen. It looks like no, prisons are usually designed with more elegance and beauty. If I was a prisoner, I would be just made to be trapped in a fucking hellhole like that. It is so lacking in any sort of divine expression. And I think very intentionally so, but I mean, god damn, it's the modernism, the modern style. I'm in construction, so I see, modern and contemporary and farmhouse all the time. Modern just means straight, flat, 90 degrees. What the fuck? That's
Right.
not artistic. That's not beauty. That's not
Do you know this?
that's not style.
Do you know the story behind the Cracker Barrel rebrand?
I
So
think
get
fill
this.
me in.
The more unique the style of building it is, the less resale chance they have on the market. So all of these Cracker Barrels with all this nice, kitschy junk from the past,
Yeah.
right? In their unique style of architecture, that's not going to cut it anymore because the holding company that owns Cracker Barrel wants it to be easily replaced by some other business. If they ever go under, they can make their money back.
Just swap it right over tomorrow, huh?
There you go.
Well, I mean, that's the eat your slop pig mentality that I think societally we're being fed as an attempt to remove us further and further from source. The more they can take beauty and wonder out of the things we can tangibly see, tangibly feel, tangibly hear, the more demoralized we are society, the lower the collective consciousness, the easier control. Right? When you're in a state of hurt, of need, of desire, you'll turn and you'll trust easily. Whereas if you're in a place of empowerment, well, that ain't so easy. You're more inclined to be like, is that best for me? Because you know what? I'm feeling pretty good internally. And I'm not sure that what you're saying actually savvies with my well-being. But if your well-being is already in the shitter, well, anything they say, any slop that they feed you will be that sustenance, that hit that you need to subside a little longer. And I think that's the goal, the general slow ticking away and removal of all those artistic and mystical aspects that made our ancestors so connected to divinity. And today is as we see around the world, people are losing their way from divinity. But that there's always the kickback effect, right? The boomerang effect, and that's what's happening now. And I think that's cool. So it's fascinating to witness in real time. That's for sure.
It's so true though, because beauty has patterns and it inspires dialectic and it inspires mirroring, and you know, that's a big way that people get to know themselves. That's actually, I guess, what my username means, ErosUp. Eros is a ladder.
That's cool. I like that. It's like music for me is a big one. I find music profoundly connecting to source, and what I vibe with in the day depends entirely on how I'm feeling. My music range is very eclectic, and I'll bounce all over the place depending on what I'm receiving from the universe, how my energy needs to be for the day. And then I use that music as a tool to empower me and feel that thing I need to be feeling. And that's a powerful drug. And it's a pure one, right? I mean, that's the beauty of music, has the power to empower me to do more than I would have if I just went my day without it. And, you know, you can take that and apply it to whatever example speaks most to the individual. And it's true, like the Great Pyramid. Imagine walking in front of that thing every day as an Egyptian regular, 5,000 years ago. Would you have not looked at this man-made mountain and just been in absolute awe and wonder of what is possible from God, from you, just as a oneness? You would look at that and it would inspire you. It would empower you. It's an interesting thought that, now that is being intentionally removed.
Right. Well, as we get more connected and as the internet spreads more information and more translations come out, these ancient ways of thinking are going to have a much bigger influence on today's society than we could have expected,
Oh, yeah. Well, and like I mentioned a minute ago, I see Hermeticism in a lot of different forms appearing in people, and some of them will call it that. Some of them are only attuned to parts of it, but there is, I think, a growing understanding, just as a boomerang effect, of how important these connections actually are, and finding a roadmap to get back to them as more of those roadmaps become available, because different theologies are going to appeal to different people, right? Like we all want our individual flavor of ice cream if we're going to eat ice cream. So I think there's so much profound knowledge to be had, regardless of what ice cream flavor you want to bite out of. If you're taking an earnest bite, it's going to be fulfilling.
Absolutely. Do you guys have any more questions? I think this has been a great episode. You can go around the room and guys, tell them where they can find you. Go ahead, Eros.
Well, I guess I did have one question. So the oracle at the Temple of Apollo, right? There was all that limestone around it, right? There was another type of stone as well, and that I can't remember. But there hasn't been any like studies of the like any electric fields or anything like that around it.
Not that I encountered in my research, no. And that's why I say, like, I think it's very interesting that like in South America and in Egypt, they seem to have a very, and in North America as well, in the mound culture, they seem to have a very in-tuned understanding of energetic node points that I'm not sure the Greeks either valued or understood. I don't know which. They might have valued other things over those energetic points, and maybe that's why they seem to have less prominence. I really don't have an answer for that, but as far as I could tell in my research, no, there hasn't been any sort of energetic science or data recording done on the site, which is kind of interesting. You would think they would want to know if there's any interesting magnetic properties there. Or maybe that's too woo for science to even consider right now.
They might not like the answer.
Well, right. Yeah. They're like, oh shit. It's like all those like 108 other sites we have that are sitting somehow inexplicably right on top of an energy node.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you had pointed out like the piezoelectric energy earlier. And like, even with my incredibly like very incredibly narrow understanding of how energy is created from geology, when you're at an active fault point, that friction is always going to be a place of high piezoelectric creation. And that's why the pyramid's construction is designed in such a way that as the earth moves, the stones are very subtly, the limestone is very subtly interacting with itself and creating that piezoelectricity. So absolutely it would have been occurring, but I don't think it's been measured for.
Okay, I guess I had one other question. Okay, Apollo, right? He's the main guy. So for divination, I guess Apollo is an interesting pick. Would you think that's because like a shared consciousness can lead to an unfolding of divination, of seeing how the patterns unfold? I don't know if that question is well relayed, but
well, you're right that Apollo is a really interesting choice, and I don't know exactly why, because like to me in my mind and like our understanding, like I would want to talk to Athena. I would want the goddess of wisdom telling me what's up. So I don't. That's actually a great question. I'm gonna have to dig into now for my own curiosity. I don't know what made Apollo the psychic draw.
I got the answer.
Tell me. I would love to know.
So Apollo is most commonly seen with his consorts or his group as the Muses, right? So the 9 Muses are the followers of Apollo most closely, and so these 9 Muses would be calliope, right? Music, and you've got dancing, and you've got these other forms of inspiration, right? Inspiration, that's how you take the god in, and from that inspiration, you achieve a certain kind of gnosis. So you'd have all of these things like music and these other influences being used to achieve that divine state of madness, and then let Apollo or the words of the god flow through you. And
Well,
he is the
that
god
makes
of
sense.
music as well, and
That's
healing.
well, that ties in to a lot of what we've talked about. So that's very interesting. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yes, indeed. Well, the mother of the muses is Mnemosyne, which is memory. So memory is the birth of all of this inspiration. So it's through memory and the access through the memory that you can actually achieve these things. And Nick's been talking about the Memory Palace with his work on Giordano Bruno, which is also like a extension of that Hermeticism as well. So there's that Hermetic thread throughout all of it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Did you have any final thoughts? Anything to say about that? Yes. All right. Well, this has been awesome. Well, this has been another Occult Reject / Headless Giant podcast. And thank you, Cody. Tell them where they can find you.
Well, I absolutely had a great time getting to come on. Thank you guys. And you can find me at East10 Outpost. Anywhere you social media online, I probably have a profile there. So just at East10 Outpost.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And we will see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.